following production is brought to you by Derrick Lamon Enterprises, a subsidiary of LBM Entertainment, exclusively licensed for use on Patreon.com. Enjoy the show. Welcome back to Patreon.com/Derrick Lamon Experience, your one-stop shop for your gaming news. Sit down, or actually grab a drink, a snack, whatever. If you're in your car, make sure you have no other distractions. This is the big one, okay? There was a lot of gaming news this week after what is generally a slow time in the year because we're getting out the major fourth quarter releases, gearing up for the Game Awards, end of the year lists, all that good stuff. So there's a lot. I'm going to start with some rumors like I've been doing the past couple of weeks. Take this with a grain of salt. We have no confirmation or anything. This comes from TCMF Games on Twitter. Apparently, PS5 From Software exclusive is coming sometime. Rumors began in 2021 that From Software is working on a PS5 exclusive that is not Bloodborne or Demon Souls related. Demon Souls Remake launched with the PlayStation 5, so I don't even know why that's part of the conversation. This is why I say take everything with a grain of salt, because if you're into gaming at all, and maybe a Super PlayStation fan, you would remember that when the PlayStation 5 launched in November of 2020, it launched with Spider-Man Miles Morales, Spider-Man Remastered of 2018, Demon Souls Remake, Sackboy's Big Adventure, and some other games I can't remember. But Demon Souls Remake was there at launch. That's what Bluepoint was working on. Anyway, the game is also not Bloodborne or Demon Souls related, but it's more Souls-like than Elden Ring and Sekiro. Interesting. Miyazaki is working on it. Sony owns 14% of From Software and is documented in their financial report as assistive to creating new games in the console space. From Software and Sony already have two other collaborations with Demon Souls and Bloodborne. From Software is set to expand heavily because they're working on multiple projects. No information on when this game could release if it's, quote, real, but From Software tends to release games at a more frequent rate compared to the general industry. I think they just had Armored Core 6 come out not too long ago. I don't know. Again, this, as of right now, it's just a rumor. There's no confirmation, so take this with a grain of salt. I'm going to tell you right now, this does not move the needle for me, but I know a lot of you guys are into From Software and the Souls genre, so it is part of the news. I'm not even a From Software fan. Me saying I'm not a huge fan is ridiculous because I'm not a fan of what they do at all. And it's not just them. I'm not a fan of the Souls genre of games. I get it. You guys love it. A lot of you guys are not fans of the stuff that I play, and that's perfectly fine. I'm just not a fan of this. But if this is real and you guys, if you're one of the people praying and hoping for a PlayStation 5 native version of Bloodborne, I get it. It's just like the Nintendo people who wait for Metroid Prime Trilogy to be announced at Nintendo's E3 or now Summer Game Season briefing, and every year they hype themselves up, and every year they're let down. Temper your expectations. That's what I tell you guys going into every gaming conference and show, because you may think something's going to show up and it doesn't. I remember a lot of us definitely thought, and it's Sony's fault because Neil Druckmann at Summer Game Fest 2022 told us that we would know more about the Last of Us multiplayer game, next year. And then when it came time for the Sony showcase, it was not there. We didn't get to see Ben's new game. We didn't get to see whatever, what is that studio? Sucker Punch was working on. There was a lot that we didn't see at the Sony showcase. And the big highlight for me was the Metal Gear Solid 3 reveal and the Spider-Man gameplay. Other than that, there wasn't much. Project Q, which is now the PlayStation Portal, which I will be doing an unboxing of on the YouTube channel when that releases on November 15th, so stay tuned for that. But that show was kind of a letdown for me. But anyway, like I said, if you're into From Software games, and it seems that everybody is, me being the exception, apparently they have something new coming for you guys. Apparently it's exclusive to PlayStation 5. We'll just have to wait and see. I seriously doubt that would be the Elden Ring DLC because, well, I tell you what, never mind, because I remember GTA 4 released on PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360, but Microsoft got the rights to the DLC. The Lost and the Damned, and The Ballad of Gay Tony. I think it eventually came to PlayStation, but I know that Microsoft had first rights to that stuff. So I'm not saying that they're going to release the Elden Ring DLC for PlayStation 5 players only. I doubt that's going to happen. Um, but stranger things have been known to happen in the past. In other news, this is very interesting. I had to get the translation for this. This comes from Idle Sloth 84 on Twitter. Yeah, I'm still calling it Twitter. I don't call it X. That's stupid. FYI, apparently Xbox is taking back consoles from people of the media who criticized the series as price increase in Brazil. This is very interesting. I've never heard of anything like this. So, all the people who got those advanced units of the Series S, content creators, people who got their hands on PS5s and Series X and Series S's, apparently, since Microsoft has increased the price of the Series S, and also let me bring up the fact that when the PlayStation 5 Slim, when we got that stuff a few weeks back, and the price of the digital one went up, everybody lost their shit. Like Sony, so anti-consumer. Microsoft did the same thing. Now it's not happening in the US, but it is happening in other parts of the world, apparently Brazil. And these people who were gifted these units, these people in games media who were gifted these units, they complained about the price increase. And apparently Microsoft is taking these consoles back. Like, I can't picture Microsoft showing up to your door like, give us the Xbox back because you spoke ill of the company because we raised the price of the console. Well, we're all consumers at the end of the day. So, I don't know how media goes in Brazil because, number one, I don't live in Brazil. I'm not Brazilian. But I don't know how much the price increase was. I'm pretty sure I covered it previously, but I would have to go back to a previous episode, and I'm damn sure not going to do that. So, I mean, it is what it is. But just the sheer thought of them going and taking consoles back from people, um, because I mean, this is just insane. Because you spoke ill of the company because they raised some prices. That is really fucking ballsy on the part of Microsoft. I can't fathom them really doing this. If this is true, that is insane. But he says apparently. Um, but I can't read this tweet because I do not know what language this is. It's not English. I can tell you that. Um, if this is true, yikes! Look out. But what's not so funny is what is going on with the other issue with Xbox. So who remembers being younger and their parents getting them a console and the console only came with one controller? And then you're like, yeah, I need another controller. And then they go out and go to the store and get another controller. But it's not the certified one that goes with the console. Everybody like always had that extra controller that was Mad Cats or something like that. And the controller, like after a while, the D-pad, you couldn't go left with the D-pad or something like that, or one of the analog sticks. We all had it, and I know it's true because we've all told these jokes on Twitter. I got my PlayStation for Christmas, and then I got Game Day 97, I think, which was the alternative, one of the alternatives to Madden at that time. It was by 989 Sports, which is basically a PlayStation studio that took care of sports games, right? So my parents, I was like, I need another controller so friends and cousins and stuff can play with me. So they went out and my dad's like, I got you another controller. I'm like, sweet, and he takes it out of his pocket and I was like, oh, thanks. And sure as shit, probably around May or June, the D-pad didn't work. Like you couldn't go left on the D-pad. You can only go up, down, or right. It didn't go left. So we all have these experiences with these controllers that do not work or stop working after a while. Microsoft has a new policy. Xbox's new policy: say goodbye to unofficial accessories from November thanks to error 0x82D60002 update. This update informs players their devices will be blocked. From November 12th of 2023, Microsoft will no longer allow unauthorized third-party accessories to be used with its Xbox consoles. Players are reporting a warning message displaying on Xbox when plugging in unauthorized accessories, notifying them of their date. Their accessories will be blocked with that error. Xbox advises returning the accessory and instead referring to a list of authorized products on its website. Let me pause right there. Microsoft, do you really think people kept the receipt from each accessory they bought for their Xbox? Like, let's fucking be real. Let's be fucking real. Now, because the greater percentage of shopping is done online now, usually Amazon, you have it in your order history. So I get that. But they're not going to give you a refund for a product you've been using, especially just because Microsoft said, "Hey, guess what? We're no longer going to let you use unauthorized accessories with your Xbox." You're just out that money. Like, be fucking clear. This is crazy. The message is shown due to the latest console build, which is said to be causing console issues when using these third-party accessories. Um, as of October 29th, we've heard from our sources familiar with Microsoft's plans that this may be related to Microsoft expanding its program for approved third-party wireless Xbox controllers. Most Xbox third-party controllers right now are wired, which is true. If you ever go into GameStop and you see a controller that looks like an Xbox controller, like, oh shit, it's $20. That's because they have the wire tucked behind it. That controller is not wireless. You're not going to get a wireless controller for $20. I'm telling you that right now. So those are wired accessories. Um, Microsoft responded to our questions for clarification around this new policy. Update today, November 1st of 2023, when I'm recording this, Microsoft has further clarified that users who connect USB devices through the Xbox adaptive controller for accessibility purposes will not be impacted by the new restrictions. So you have to buy the adaptive controller in order to use third-party controllers with an Xbox. That's what they're saying here. How much is the adaptive controller? Let me go take a look really quickly. Holy shit, it's $100. Best Buy $99.99, Target $99.99. Yeah. So in order to use a third-party controller, you have to plug it into the adaptive controller. The adaptive controller is actually it's a really cool controller. The reason for this controller is to help those disabled who couldn't generally who cannot use a standard controller with D-pad and analog sticks. They would add other things, and that way, everybody can play. They had that really great commercial where all the kids were happy because the other kid who was physically disabled in the neighborhood could play Xbox with them, and that was really cool. And it was a really heartwarming spot. It does not warm my heart that they're charging people $100 to use a controller they already have, though. That's fucking crazy. Um, Users that are connecting devices via 3.5 millimeter ports or via the USB sockets on the Xbox adaptive controller will not be impacted by these restrictions. This is to ensure that third-party devices designed for accessibility will remain viable. Quote, there is no impact to players using the Xbox adaptive controller and any peripherals plugged into the Xbox adaptive controller's USB and 3.5 millimeter ports. This includes both licensed designed for Xbox devices listed on the accessories hub page, as well as those that currently connect with the Xbox adaptive controller. If you do not receive an error code, then your accessory will not be impacted. For questions, please reach out to Disability Answer Desk. Let's see what their hub page has on it. Logitech Extreme 3D Pro joystick, Logitech Adaptive Gaming Kit. Yeah. So those wired Xbox controllers, I do not see them here. Those ones that you get from GameStop and stuff like that, they're not on the hub. So you're shit out of luck if you were using one of those controllers. I'm telling you that right now. Right now. The big story before I get to everything else, there's some problems over at Sony. And I had some questions about the whole Jim Ryan leaving and all that stuff on Channel 3. If you go to the YouTube channel, go back and there's a video about the whole Jim Ryan situation. More stuff is coming out at PlayStation, and people wanted to act like this wasn't a big deal, and I tried to tell people that it was, and there was something being hidden. I don't know exactly what. Bungie, Destiny 2 developer Bungie is the latest PlayStation studio to have layoffs. Full scope isn't clear yet, but CEO Pete Parsons emailed the company this morning to say they'll be having a team meeting today to talk about some news today coming out of Bungie, as staff are informed. This came from Jason Schreier. Bungie laid off 8% of staff on Monday, or around 100 people, sources tell Bloomberg. 2 weeks ago, staff were told they were projected to miss revenue targets by 45%. Employees were galvanized to get things on track, then came surprise layoffs. They missed revenue targets by 45%. 45%. Keep in mind, as I mentioned earlier about tempering your expectations, we thought we were going to see the Last of Us multiplayer game at either the PlayStation Showcase or Summer Games Fest. Why? Because Neil Druckmann, when announcing the worst kept secret in gaming, which was the Last of Us PlayStation 5 remake, Neil Druckmann told us that there was, when people asked about factions, he said there's a Last of Us multiplayer game with a story and this, that, and the third. We'll talk about it more sometime next year. And then we got to next year, which is this year, and that has not happened. And then we find out that Bungie, who Sony acquired to basically oversee their move to games as a service, and again, there's more on that to come. Bungie essentially told the people at PlayStation, the game looks nice, but the long-term viability and your ability to make any revenue off of this game, I don't see it happening. Why did Sony trust them? Because Bungie makes Destiny, and Destiny has made a ton of money. Let me tell you guys this. Lightning can strike twice. There are people who have been struck by lightning twice, and sometimes lightning does strike twice. In the terms of Destiny and the terms of Fortnite. Everybody else wanted to chase games as a service, and it is not viable. That is not going to work all the time. I've told you guys, the reason I think that Fortnite is still chugging along is it appeals to the younger generation with the emotes and all that stuff. Then you have the licensed content. You can play with NFL jerseys, NBA jerseys. You can play as Dragon Ball Z characters, characters from the Marvel Cinematic Universe, whoever else, films, RoboCop, Terminator, John Wick, who the fuck, Jack Skellington from A Nightmare Before Christmas. All those things are in there. The licensed content and the emotes and all that stuff and the battle pass, that keeps Fortnite going. Lightning can strike twice. Again, it struck once with Fortnite, and it also struck with Destiny. Warzone for Call of Duty worked for a while, and now it seems to not be working. It seems that Call of Duty and Activision, which is now a Microsoft product, are pivoting from that. So everybody chasing that games as a service rabbit lost their mind thinking it was going to work for them. Now, PlayStation said, Bungie seems to know a thing or two, so they can tell us if this is going to work. Now, all these people are losing faith in Naughty Dog as a studio. Is their output bad? I guess you could say that, but there was a time Naughty Dog was releasing as many games as a former Rockstar would. Rockstar puts out a game once every generation. We got Red Dead Redemption 2 and the PlayStation 4, Xbox One generation. We're apparently going to get GTA 6 in this generation. Before that, Rockstar used to pump out games back to back to back. Keep in mind, Uncharted, Uncharted 2, and Uncharted 3 all came out with, like, I think 2 years apart each. Maybe 3 on one of those titles to the next one, but it doesn't matter. AAA games are costing the time to develop these games is about 6 years now, and they're costing millions upon millions and millions of dollars. Why? I'm not a big Bungie. Number one, I was never a Halo guy. That's number one. Number two, I bought the first Destiny. I just was like, this is not for me. I let my friends talk me into that, and my former boss at my old job, and they're like, no, you got to play with us tonight. And that shit put me to sleep. I'm not kidding, y'all. That shit put me to sleep. So I never believed, like, I'm not saying that Bungie's a bad studio. People seem to love the games, so I get it. But at the same time, The Last of Us is a beloved PlayStation franchise. I get you want to listen to Bungie, but to say people aren't going to spend money on this is ridiculous because everybody was asking for Factions 2. When they showed us The Last of Us Part 2, I was like, okay, what about Factions Part 2? Where's Factions? When Last of Us 2 launched without Factions, when are we going to get an update on Factions? So to believe that people, consumers would not spend money on that product is very crazy. When Sony acquired Bungie, they said that they would continue to operate on their own. They would be part of the PlayStation studio, but they would operate on their own. Apparently, this has nothing to do with Sony. Sony didn't tell them to lay off any staff. This is a Bungie thing. But when you fail to meet revenue targets by 45%, the writing is on the goddamn wall. Well, there's a word I like to use, irony, right? Because you told us that this game was not a viable option for retention of revenue, and then you guys couldn't meet your revenue goal and you had to lay off 100 people. This is fucking crazy. The layoff decisions came directly from Bungie management, not Sony. This is not about Sony replacing Bungie employees with their own people. Many employee benefits, though not health insurance, only last until the end of the month if you're let go. Laying people off on the 30th means a single additional day of coverage. They laid them off on the 30th of October. Their benefits go to the end of the month. You got 1 day of benefits. Imagine if you did get sick 2 days later and you don't have health insurance. This is insane. Many employees had unvested shares as a result of the Sony purchase. The shares would be received based on staying with the company for a certain number of years following the sale. Those shares revert to Bungie if you leave, even if you're fired, which is what's now happening to many of those affected. So these people who got shown the door, their shares were no longer invested after they were acquired by Sony. And because they're let go, those shares go back to Bungie. So they're getting a severance check and nothing more. This is absolutely disgusting. At the highest level. This is corporate greed. This is one studio telling everybody else this shit's not good, but then they missed their target by 45%. That is fucking insane. Again, Jim Ryan's gone sometime next year. Now Connie Booth is gone. Sony Interactive Entertainment executive Connie Booth has reportedly left PlayStation. As reported by game developer David Jaffe, the information was verified from sources outside of Sony. Sony or Booth did not provide a reason for the exit. In a statement sent to Axios, a PlayStation spokesperson said she helped drive the success PlayStation Studios is experiencing today, and her passion in fostering an environment where a team's creative vision could fully flourish has left a positive impact on many game developers. Booth joined Sony back in 1989, and throughout her career, she climbed through the firm's ranks. She last served as Senior Vice President, Head of Internal Production at Sony Interactive Entertainment. The executive oversaw the production of many titles such as Crash Bandicoot, Ratchet & Clank, Infamous, and Marvel's Spider-Man Miles Morales. In 2020, Booth was inducted into the Academy of Interactive Arts and Sciences Hall of Fame for her work in the games industry. I've heard that Herman Hulst, a guy who I think not failed. Here's the thing. Before Horizon, Guerrilla was the Killzone studio. And while many people like Killzone, it was nothing that lit the world on fire. It just wasn't. Let's not sit here and tell these lies, all right? Killzone didn't light the world on fire. You never heard anybody say, oh my God, Killzone. Like, it just wasn't one of those games. They pivot and they make Horizon Zero Dawn and they set the world ablaze. And all of a sudden, because they had one amazing game, Herman Hulst is capable of leading PlayStation Studios. Please tell me how that works. So now that Connie Booth is gone, apparently Herman's putting someone from Guerrilla in her place. Jim Ryan did not do a great job, in my opinion. I think that... Never mind. Whatever. This whole games as a service shit, all this shit is connected and tied. Everybody over there fucked up really, really bad. Really, really bad. And we're starting to see how this is playing out. Xfire has an article up, Sony doubting its multi-billion-dollar commitment on games as a service. For what it's worth, Sega and Bandai have a history of working together with Sony on PlayStation exclusives over the years. Sony is reportedly scaling back its games as a service strategy with help from Sega and Bandai Namco. However, it appears Sony may not be entirely abandoning the games as a service model, but refining its approach and leaning on third-party expertise. Maintaining its competitiveness in the games as a service arena is also crucial for Sony, given Microsoft's acquisition of Activision Blizzard King. Sony's recent multi-billion-dollar investment in games as a service just became the talk of the town. The reason? Talks of Sony scaling back on its commitment to supposedly dying genre. According to Reset Era user Head on the Block, Sony forced several first-party studios to work on an online game, but Sony is reversing course, and it's said that it's using third-party to catch up on some IPs. They've cannibalized the future of the PlayStation 5 by pivoting and going to games as a service, and now you're scaling back. Look at all those man hours of development you lost. Look at all the games that they could have been working on. Naughty Dog's last game launched May of 2020. We don't know what's coming next because they shelved The Last of Us multiplayer. We don't know what we're getting from Sucker Punch next. We don't know what Sony Bend is working on. We have a good idea of what Insomniac is working on. They got rid of Japan Studio. Media Molecule is gone. Jade Raymond's studio, Haven. We saw something at that showcase. Did not impress me. Deviation. That's a done deal. They pivoted, and now we don't know what we're going to be playing on our PlayStation 5 other than third-party games. This is disgusting. The anonymous user named Sega and Bandai Namco as two companies that are helping Sony out, with the former in particular working on an IP that will wipe the floor. However, they're careful to note that it's going to be at least 4 years until some of these changes are seen. Which means, remember when it was all those dark days for Xbox users when they basically had nothing to play and their Xbox One was basically a $500 paperweight? Guess what? Those days are headed for Sony. Because they chased... If you wanted to make 2 games as a service games, that's one thing. Having 12 in development, you cannibalize what these studios were good at. Now that you're pivoting off this, all those man hours and that time that could have been used developing other games, continuing great franchises, or coming up with new IP, now you fuck them over. Again, Sega and Bandai Namco have a history working with Sony, so that part of this leak makes sense, but until otherwise confirmed, we're betting that we'll only get hints, never an actual confirmation. It's best to take this with a grain of salt. Earlier this year, Sony delayed the multiplayer spin-off to The Last of Us, which eventually iced and canceled as per the reports. Following this, many have questioned the sustainability of Sony's games as a service approach, especially after a renowned studio like Naughty Dog couldn't deliver. It's not that they couldn't, it's that Bungie told Sony, you're not going to make any money off of this. And then lo and behold, Bungie lays off 100 people days ago because they missed their target revenue by 45%. The pot calling the kettle black. This is insane. The practice of pivoting traditionally single-player studios towards games as a service has drawn plenty of flack. Yeah, you fucking think? Such a transition is counterintuitive, often leading to companies failing, alienating, or laying off their staff. The very nature of games as a service requires a commitment far beyond that of traditional single-player or multiplayer modes. These services demand extensive and ongoing support, possibly spanning years, in hopes of attaining the rare, elusive hit. A single-player game or one with a simple multiplayer mode can be launched and then left to the care of a relatively smaller team compared to when it was still in development. In contrast, a games as a service game requires continuous nurturing, both in content and community management. Yeah. For the smaller studios, do you know how hard that is? In the midst of this hullabaloo, it's crucial to remember that Sony studios often praise the company for granting them creative freedom. This suggests that the drive for games as a service might not be entirely a top-down decision. I highly fucking doubt that. I highly doubt that Sucker Punch was like, we just made our greatest game ever and everybody loves it. We want to work on a multiplayer game now. I just don't see that happening. Ben Studio. Hey, we made what we thought was a really good game, and it sold decently, but you guys told us we're not making a sequel to it, and we're going to work on something else. Oh, you want us to work on a games as a service? Okay, that's cool, I guess. Nah, we're stoked for this. That's bullshit. One born from a developer eager to tap into the games service market. Perhaps Sony granted them too much autonomy, or they bit off more than they can chew, or maybe it's a case of both, which ultimately led to missteps in the transition. While it's possible to interpret the recent rumors as Sony pulling away from games as a service following the imminent resignation of Jim Ryan, just saying, man, some believe the company is merely recalibrating its strategy. It's worth noting that Sony has invested heavily in this area, especially with its acquisition of Bungie. Their expertise in live services is invaluable, or so you thought, and Sony's substantial financial commitments suggest they are unlikely to abandon ship based solely on a single game's failure. Horseshit. It is, if it's true, what's happening is a more nuanced approach. Sony could be focusing on assigning specific studios like Bungie to spearhead high quality live services. You mean the studio that just laid off 100 people? The studio that just missed their revenue target by 45%? That same Bungie? Is that who we're talking about? Big mistake. Where was I? I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. While letting the other studios traditionally rooted in single-player experiences continue in their domain or transition at a more organic pace, depending on their preference. The abrupt shift of single-player studios to games as a service could have been a miscalculation on Sony's part. One they are now rectifying. However, completely reversing their games as a service course seems implausible, especially with significant projects in development. Changing a game's fundamental design midway, especially transitioning between games as a service and single player, doesn't result in favorable outcome. Thus, it might be more about streamlining and optimizing the games as a service workflow than outright abandonment. This approach would make sense after Sony invested billions in the genre again earlier this year, suggesting it still firmly believes in its promise to release close to a dozen online games by 2026. Buddy, it's almost 2024. And all we've seen so far is Helldivers and Foam Stars that have demos. Besides, Sony can't afford to rest on its laurels. Microsoft's acquisition of Activision Blizzard King positions them as a dominant force in the live service arena with juggernauts like Call of Duty, World of Warcraft, and Candy Crush. The financial success of games like Warzone Mobile highlights the sheer profitability of games as a service. In this context, it's hard to envision Sony completely sidelining their games as a service ambitions. While rumors suggest Sony is reassessing games as a service strategy, a complete reversal seems unlikely. They're just spitting the same thing out. I don't know. Dude, I told you guys, I said it. This is a bad idea. Investing that much into one genre of games was a bad idea. And every time everybody's like, you're acting like Chicken Little, the sky's not falling. Bullshit. I told you. Naughty Dog's track record spoke for itself. Let's just go back. Crash Bandicoot, bangers, right? Jack and Daxter, bangers. And then they decided, let's get into a more serious type of game. Uncharted, Uncharted 2, Uncharted 3, Uncharted 4, Uncharted Lost Legacy, all bangers. The Last of Us 2, bangers. Now, I understand they wanted to give us factions, but give us a different spin on it. That's fine. You're telling me Bungie came in and said, this game is making no money, and Sony was okay with that, knowing that Naughty Dog has won several awards. Does that sound right to anybody that's thinking clearly? There's no fucking way. There's no way. They're lucky that the PS5, it's outselling the Xbox Series X and S consoles 9-1. Yes, that number is accurate. For every 9 PlayStation 5s bought, there is one Xbox Series X or Series S purchase. They're outselling them 9-1. That is a staggering stat. They're well ahead in the console sales space, but Microsoft doesn't care about selling consoles anymore. It's about how many people they can get to pay, whether $10 or $15 or whatever, for Game Pass on a monthly basis. It's consolidation. That's why they acquired all these different studios and publishers, to consolidate and have content for Game Pass. And to Phil Spencer, I say bravo. This was well played. To Jim Ryan, don't let the door hit you with the good Lord split you. You might have ruined one of the most profitable things in gaming. You might have single-handedly set PlayStation Studios and the brand back 3 to 5 years, easily. When I told y'all this, everybody's like, stop acting like Chicken Little. The sky is not falling. The sky is falling. And while this all happened, I don't care about Bethesda. Microsoft acquired Bethesda. Who cares? Activision Blizzard, that's a big fucking deal. That's a big deal. World of Warcraft, Candy Crush, Call of Duty, Crash Bandicoot, now, Spyro, now. Yeah, these former PlayStation games, they're Microsoft's property now. Telling you, man, I saw this coming and everybody was like, you're bugging, chill out, you're bugging. No, I'm not at all. Not at all. But here we are. In other news, Nintendo reportedly patented a dual-screen gaming device that can split into two. The two sides of the machine can operate independently. A recently filed Nintendo patent has been discovered that refers to a dual-screen gaming device that can be split into half. That's according to Game Rant, which shared images supposedly attached to a patent reminiscent of the Nintendo 3DS. I don't think we're getting another 3DS, guys. I'm telling you. They put R&D for handheld and console, wrapped them all into one department. The Switch is what it is. The Switch is what you're going to be playing for the next umpteen years. Deal with it. However, instead of the clamshell design, which saw the top screen fold in onto the bottom screen, this design sees the top screen face out even when the machine is closed. The top and bottom parts of the machine would also be able to operate independently of each other. While this may indicate some of Nintendo's potential idea for future devices, the company has a history of similar patents being filed and never coming to fruition. Prior to the announcement of the Nintendo Switch, a patent was filed by the company showing a handheld games machine with a large oval screen with analog sticks protruding through the screen. According to VGC sources, the company has dispatched Switch 2 development kits to key partners with a launch plan for the second half of 2024. I've heard it was called the Nintendo Focus, but I've also heard Switch 2. The platform holder also showed off tech demos for its Nintendo Switch successor behind closed doors at Gamescom in August, it's understood. The company recently reiterated that it plans to use its Nintendo account system to help smooth the transition from Switch to its next gaming platform. That doesn't mean they're not going to try to resell us Super Mario Bros. 3, which I would probably buy again. I've probably bought that game 5 times. There are no cloud purchases with Nintendo. You really like this game? You want to play it on a new console? Great, $60. You're buying it again. That's essential. That's going to happen. Anybody who thinks otherwise is insane. Nintendo does not care about game preservation. They don't. Quote, in the past, every device we transitioned to had a whole new account system. Creating the Nintendo account will allow us to communicate with our players if and when we make a transition to a new platform. To help ease that process or transition, Nintendo of America President Doug Bowser said. Bullshit. Quote, our goal is to minimize the dip you typically see in the last year of one cycle and the beginning of another, he continued. I can't speak to the possible features of a new platform, but the Nintendo account is a strong basis for having communication as we make the transition. Yeah, whatever. I'll believe it when I see it. I know Nintendo, that train is never late. That train is never late. The more that they can get you to shell out money again, the more they are going to do it. I'm just telling you that right now. Speaking of the Nintendo Switch, the Twitch app to be removed on Switch. In just a few months, the Twitch app will be removed on Switch. The news was announced in an email sent out to users today. The app is set to be removed on January 31st of 2024. Twitch did not provide a reason for the discontinuation. For those looking to experience Twitch content, users are advised to visit the website on their browser or other devices. The Twitch app first released on Switch in November of 2021. Aside from live stream gaming content, viewers could also watch in real life broadcasts and even sports. Basketball, baseball, soccer, football, swimming, wrestling, hockey, pool, and much more through talk shows, league channels, fantasy, and esports. YouTube, Hulu, Crunchyroll, Funimation, and Pokemon TV apps remain available on the Switch and can be downloaded from the eShop. Have you ever used the Twitch app since its release 2 years ago? No. I didn't even know it was available. I'm not going to lie. Or maybe I did at the time and I never downloaded it. I'm going to tell you right now, if you're going to watch stuff on your Switch screen, if it's not docked to the TV, if you have a smartphone, you're better off just watching it on the smartphone. You're going to get better resolution, Bluetooth headphones, stuff like that, quality of life things. I love Nintendo, but man, they make some bonehead fucking decisions. But we're talking about a bunch of stodgy old Japanese businessmen who don't want to change the way that they do business. And they don't care to, because as long as Nintendo puts out a Mario game, a Zelda game, a Metroid game, and maybe a Castlevania game, who knows? Either way, if you put out the core Nintendo IP, we're still going to run to buy it. We're all part of the problem. I myself definitely. But I'm not going to stop playing Mario or Zelda. I'm sorry. So it is what it is. But Nintendo's getting over on people. I'm just saying. Still love you, but you guys are getting over. In other news, our good friend Cliffy B is in the news. Quote, Phil Spencer has my number. Cliff Bleszinski, aka Cliffy B, the creator behind the Gears of War series, has suggested the games get a God of War style reboot. Oh, and that Xbox just needs to give him a call. Speaking with comicbook.com about his upcoming comic Scrapper, conversation turned to the shooter series. Bleszinski said he could consult on any ideas Microsoft may have for the series and suggested it could get a, quote, a little bit of a reboot like God of War had in 2018. Quote, I've always said Phil Spencer has my number, he told the publication. I'm happy to consult. Gears will always be near and dear to my heart. The creator went on to reminisce about the series as a whole, stating he often likes to watch key Gears of War cutscenes on YouTube with a mimosa in hand. All right, Cliffy B. I love Cliffy B. I've said this in other interviews, but I'm friends with Karen Gillian from Avengers and Guardians of the Galaxy and Doctor Who and all of that. Absolute sweetheart. We had lunch with her at GalaxyCon recently in Raleigh, and the thing is, there's a scene where Doctor Who, Matt, and Karen take Vincent Van Gogh to the Musée d'Orsay through the TARDIS and time travel and whatnot, he said, of somewhat of a tangent. Vincent Van Gogh lived a tortured life. He believed his work was terrible. He struggled to sell a painting, and then for him to see his impact, and then Matt the Doctor grabs Bill Nye, not the science guy, the British actor. What does this have to do with the game? Anyway, the developer recalled seeing people comment on various Gears of War cutscenes where players recalled having to put the controller down and as they sat stunned by events that have just unfolded before them, and said that this had been incredibly important to him. He also felt this was the way when he hears about fans getting Gears of War tattoos. For people actually getting tattoos of something that you made on their bodies is the most flattering thing, he said. When his interviewer commented that Gears of War 3 was the first game to make them cry, Cliffy B replied, that means a fucking lot to me, even though I'm wearing a shirt that says, I eat ass in Japanese. Ladies and gentlemen, Cliff Bleszinski. The developer went on to share his thoughts on the gaming industry today while reflecting what he called the golden era from around the time Gears of War 3 was released. Bleszinski said it now feels like everybody's trying to move to games as a service. Whoa! Didn't we just have this conversation about how games as a service is a bad thing? Anyway. Phil Spencer's trying to become the Netflix of video games with Game Pass. I get that, I respect it, but honestly, I'm not playing shit these days, the Gears of War creator said. I'm basically reading books and comic books. As for the Gears of War series, more generally, Netflix currently has plans for a live-action film adaptation. This project was first announced toward the end of last year, and since the Dune and Doctor Strange, screenwriter John Spates has been brought on to handle the script. Additionally, former WWE wrestler and Guardians of the Galaxy actor Dave Bautista really wants to play Marcus Phoenix in the adaptation, and he 100% should. Back in November, Bautista took to Twitter to share his eagerness for the role, stating he can't make this any easier for the producers before tagging both Netflix and Gears of War social media handles. And Bautista looks like fucking Marcus Phoenix, I'm sorry. He's the right size. He's literally Marcus's build and looks like him. This couldn't be any easier if they tried. Just saying. And, might I add, he's a damn good actor. Shout out to my guy Dave Bautista, the animal Bautista. Do I think Gears of War needs to be rebooted? I was not in on Gears of War when it released originally on the Xbox 360. I played the remastered version for the Xbox One, and then with that purchase, I got the original trilogy plus Gears of War Judgment for free, and then I went back and played them, and I love them. By the time Gears of War 4 came out, I was completely stoked. Gears 5 as well. I think I'm going to stream some Gears of War 4 soon, actually, because I really do love that game. I don't know. I don't know if you want to reboot it now, considering the way that the last Gears ended. There's that whole storyline with Kate, and depending on who you chose to save, whether it was Dale or JD and that whole situation. So I don't know if it's the time to reboot it. I don't know. You'd have to work the ending of the last Gears game into that for it to make any sense. So I don't know. But Cliffy B's right. Phil is basically trying to make Game Pass, is the Netflix of video games. That's essentially what it is. Like I said, it's consolidation. That's all it is. So I don't know. But shout out to Cliffy B, man. We love you, Cliffy B. In other news, Max Payne 1 and 2 remake now ready for production, Remedy says. Here we fucking go. Just a matter of time. Remedy has issued an update on its all-in-development games while stressing it's too early to comment on sales of the recently released Alan Wake 2. First up is an update on the Max Payne 1 and 2 remakes, which Remedy said in a financial report had progressed into the production readiness stage. Quote, we have gained clarity on the style and scope of the game, and we have an exceptionally well-organized team working on it. With these accomplishments, we are excited about the project and its future success, the studio added. Remedy is working with Grand Theft Auto and Red Dead Redemption company Rockstar under a new publishing agreement to remake the first two Max Payne games for PC, PlayStation 5, and Xbox Series X and S. Remedy is handling development while Rockstar is financing the project. The Max Payne remakes will also be developed on Remedy's Northlight game engine, the same engine used to develop Control and Alan Wake 2. Thank God. Hey, Capcom, Resident Evil, much like 2, 3, 4, Village, Biohazard, and more Resident Evil we have coming up, you need to remake the first game in the RE engine like the other games, just saying. The original Max Payne games were also a result of a partnership between Remedy and Rockstar, with Remedy handling development and Rockstar Games publishing. Rockstar also handled the development of Max Payne 3. Control 2, meanwhile, continues in the proof of concept stage. The plans for the sequel are ambitious, and we have seen good progress both in designs and in the game build, Remedy explained. We will continue at this stage for the next few quarters. We focus on proving the identified key elements before moving to the next stage and scaling up the team. I'm excited because Max Payne 1 and 2 were fucking insane. They sold a bunch of PlayStation 2s and a bunch of the original Xboxes. Those are great games, so I'm really excited for this. Really, really excited for this. Speaking of Capcom, this comes from IGN. Capcom releasing unannounced major title by March of 2024. And whatever that title is, I imagine we're going to see it unveiled at the Game Awards if it's coming out by March of 24. Capcom is getting ready to launch a big game despite not having announced it yet, as Resident Evil, Devil May Cry, and Street Fighter maker has an unannounced major title launching by March of 24. As reported by VG247, Capcom said during the questions and answers section of its recent financial results presentation that this unannounced title will allow it to reach its sales goal for the year. In the second half of the financial year, we plan to release Apollo Justice Ace Attorney Trilogy in January, in addition to a currently unannounced major title, Capcom said, translated by Reddit user HZY980512 and verified by IGN. Quote, moreover, we plan to boost the sales figures of the new titles of the first half of this financial year, like Street Fighter VI, to achieve the target. It's currently unclear what this announced major title is, of course, but Capcom certainly has plenty of franchises to pull from. Its IP include the aforementioned Street Fighter, Resident Evil, and Devil May Cry, alongside the likes of Mega Man, Boo, Dead Rising, and Monster Hunter. As mentioned by Capcom, Street Fighter VI was only released in June of 23, however, meaning a new title in this franchise may be unlikely. Similarly, Resident Evil 4 Remake arrived in April of 23, and Capcom also noted that the Apollo Justice Ace Attorney Trilogy launches in January, likely knocking those off too. Devil May Cry and Monster Hunter haven't seen a full new release since 2020 and 2021, respectively, perhaps making them more likely candidates, but only time will tell what Capcom is planning. We can wait for a Devil May Cry game. Gaming Bible says Resident Evil 9 is set to be the biggest Resi yet, says Insider. The next Resident Evil game will probably be the biggest yet, rounding off the Winter Trilogy with a bang. It's been a busy year for Capcom as the company has released several top-tier titles over the last few months, the biggest arguably being the spectacular Resident Evil 4 Remake. Capcom reportedly isn't done yet, though, as it plans to release another title before the end of the fiscal year and is already working on Resident Evil 9. Not much is known about the title, apart from it'll likely continue the story of Resident Evil 8 and its DLC with Ethan Winter's daughter, Rose. Now, a leaker by the name of Dusk Golem has shared some juicy inside details on the 9th installment of the franchise, promising it's going to be one of the biggest games the series has ever seen. Thus, Gollum's findings were shared on Reddit by Tales of Us and point to Resident Evil 9 being a closing chapter to the current arc of the series. They apparently went on to say it'll have the biggest budget and longest development time of any RE game to date, and is considered by Capcom to be a chance to move on to new story arcs and focuses and take the series in new directions. They rounded off the leaks by saying RE9 is both a closing and beginning of chapters for things in Capcom's eyes. What about Resident Evil? What about the OG? Can we get some love? Can we get that remade in the RE engine? Jesus Christ. Fans were optimistic that the leak was credible, believing a final story that completes Rose's character arc and gives Chris a chance to redeem himself for Ethan's fate is exactly where the series would be expected to go. The Village DLC felt like a booked end to the Winters family story. RE9 could have Rose again as the protagonist or go with another familiar face for a final blowout. I don't know, man. Remake the original. And then when you're done with that, do Resident Evil Code Veronica, and then we can talk. But I do want Resident Evil 9. So, I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. Lastly, from our good friends over at Insider Gaming, this one is juicy. God of War Ragnarok DLC to be announced this year, the reports claim. A new report has claimed that a God of War Ragnarok DLC will be announced later this year, possibly at the Game Awards. This news comes courtesy of Spanish outlet Aragones, which has previously reported on accurate leaks in the past. According to the outlet, the news comes from sources close to Sony that claim the DLC could come at its own standalone game, similar to Spider-Man Miles Morales. I know another game that got DLC, and that was Horizon Forbidden Shores, or Burning Shores, I'm sorry. We know that they were staffing up over at Sony Santa Monica. This makes perfect sense. And if I'm not mistaken, Burning Shores got shown at the Game Awards as well. So, just saying. The report outlines that the sources are unclear on how the DLC will be announced, but theorize that all signs point to announcement at this year's Game Awards. The Game Awards will be live on December 7th of 2023 and generally does feature several major announcements and reveals from the industry. Rumors of a DLC for God of War Ragnarok have been rampant these past few months, and now with the Aragones claim, it does add weight to the rumors. Insider Gaming has reached out to sources for information, has asked Sony for official comment in regards to the report. God of War Ragnarok received universal acclaim on its release, and as of September 2023 has sold 11 million units. Sony is yet to officially announce any spin-off game or DLC for God of War Ragnarok, but it seems as though it's coming. I've heard, and let's see. Let me go to my sources. What's my guy's name? TCMF Games. The next God of War, PS5 exclusive, The Journey to Find the Giants. This is basically a job. Okay, a job for combat designer is up informing applicants that they, quote, must have knowledge of God of War 2018 and God of War Ragnarok 2022 and be able to speak in depth about the combat systems, mechanics, and enemies. There is also a senior combat designer position asking for the same. Reported earlier 2023, there is a senior combat role for companions asking those applicants to also have knowledge of the past two games. So yeah, this seems to be 100% spot on. Like, that's the thing about LinkedIn and job postings and stuff like that. It will reveal what's coming if you pay attention. And when you ask somebody to have knowledge of 2018 and Ragnarok, yes, all signs point to DLC or some sort of a small spinoff or something like that. Or a small standalone like Miles Morales. So here we are. Pay attention on December 7th, kids. It's going to be a very interesting Game Awards. Anyway, told you guys this is the big one. We almost hit a full hour. I'm going to go ahead and put this thing to bed, end it like I end every other podcast, believe in yourself first and foremost, because if you don't believe in yourself, well, then, of course, nobody will believe in you. As always, my name is Derrick Lamon Jackson, and guys, that's my time. You guys have a good one. Peace out.